Well, hello everyone. Welcome to another Noteflight Masterclass. My name is Harry Klein. I'm here with my colleague John Malanchik. We're so happy you could join us tonight. We've got a really special session planned here with Chance Thomas. Chance is going to talk about the 5 critical skills that all video game composers must have in order to be successful. I want to just encourage you to stick around to the very end of the session because we do have a very special announcement that you don't want to miss. You know, Chance Thomas has scored video games such as Dota 2, The Void, Lord of the Rings Online, just to name a few. You can see a complete list of all the video games and films that Chance has contributed his talents to at his website. You can also see all the awards he's won, which is quite impressive. So just go to chancethomas.com to do that, and I know you join me in thanking Chance for being available for this. You know, this masterclass is what Noteflight is all about. We bring music to life, and we do that by making it really easy to create, collaborate, and share music at every stage of the creative process. And for every level of musician and on any platform, if you can access a web browser, you can access Noteflight. And we, of course, support all levels of music learning, both formal and informal. A couple of housekeeping tidbits. One, this is a screenshot of what you're generally seeing on your computer. You're automatically listening through your speakers. If for some reason you want to dial in from your phone, you can click telephone and the dial-in information will be there. A word about the audio tonight. In order for everybody to be on a meeting such as this, there are some bandwidth restrictions. We're going to be playing some musical examples, and that bandwidth is getting squeezed a little bit. So the audio quality won't be as great as what you know, we all hear in our studios, in our recording studios, certainly what Chance hears in the recording studio. So just bear with us, but it's worth it. Now, also, there is a handout available that you can see in your interface toward the bottom. It says handouts. Chance has put a PDF together with links to music, links to other educational material, and so I urge you to download that before the night is over. Lastly, if you have any questions, please enter them in the box marked questions. It says enter a question for staff. Just type your question in there. If you have any technical challenges at all, please put it in there. We've got a lot of material to cover tonight. I hope we can get to some questions for Chance and get him to answer them, but we may not have time. Put them in there anyway. We'll grab some and we'll get some answers from Chance, and we'll post them and we'll let everybody know where that is. So with all of that said, I'm going to get out of the way, and I'm so happy and proud to be able to introduce Chance Thomas to all of you. Chance?
Thanks, Harry. Hey, everyone. Isn't it great that we can get together and talk about video game music? So I think that Noteflight deserves a big shout-out for coming up with this idea and bringing everyone together tonight. So good for you, Noteflight. Thank you so much for making this happen. So composing music for video games is an enormous topic. It's incredibly broad and incredibly deep. And we're going to touch lightly tonight on 5 skills that I think are critical for video game composers today in order to be successful. For those of you who want a deeper dive, who are really serious about a career, may I highly recommend that you pick up a copy of this textbook, Composing Music for Games. To be totally transparent, I am the author of this textbook. But anyway, the textbook is still a great resource. I've put about 20 years of my experience in video games, inventing things, testing things, failing, iterating, succeeding, to pass on that knowledge to the next generation so you guys can take us places where we never even dreamed of. And with that backdrop, let's go ahead and dive into our presentation. I want to begin by telling you a story. The story of my oldest son when he was only 5 or 6 years old. I was at the Game Developers Conference in San Francisco and was calling home to see how everyone was doing. And my son gets on the phone and he says, "Dad, I was watching this dinosaur movie, and the boy fell down the hill and he was all alone, so I thought he was safe. But then I heard the dinosaur music, and I got afraid because I knew he was in trouble." Isn't that amazing that a music score could tell a 5-year-old all that? That it could communicate the emotion of fear to my son. That it could communicate the context that he wasn't even seeing. There was a dinosaur that he didn't see that was coming, which added drama to the fact that this little boy was in trouble. Yes, my friends, music scoring is a language. It is a language. It is a way of communicating to the mind, the heart, and even the physiology of our audience. And so our first skill tonight is to understand this scoring language. Now, as composers, we have all these tools available to us with which we can communicate: melody, harmony, rhythm, palette, dynamics. These are all carriers of meaning, note combinations, pattern, frequency, vibrations. They all communicate specific ideas to our mind and our emotions, even to our physiology. For example, here we have a simple melody rise, C, D, E, G. So what does that communicate? What if we were to put words to it? I feel hopeful. Yeah, that works. I feel happy. Those things resonate with us. But try this. I feel tragic. No, you don't. That doesn't work at all. You know, certain things work and certain things don't. But if we were to lower the third, so now we've got C, D, E flat, G. I'm sorry, C, D, E flat, G. I feel tragic. Now it works. Why? Because music communicates things to us. Yes, my friends, music scoring is a language. Researchers at Tufts University and many others found that music communicates to our biology in profound ways. For example, when exposed to minor harmonies, these test subjects, their body temperature dropped, their skin conductivity decreased, their blood pressure went up, and their pulse went down. Yeah, all just because they were exposed to minor tonalities. This is the same thing that happens when a person is actually experiencing sadness. Major harmonies produce both respiratory changes and limbic system responses identical to happiness. Dissonant harmonies increased people's pulse rates and lit up areas of the brain associated with fear. And action music releases the same hormones that are released in an actual fight or flight situation. The power. So it's critically important that as score composers we understand this language and how it interfaces with people mentally, emotionally, and biologically. I spend 2 entire chapters in my book delving into this, talking about the tools that composers have available to them to reach and convey messengers of meaning to people's emotions, their thoughts, and even how they feel physically. I find it fascinating. So yes, the first skill that any serious composer needs to understand is this language of music scoring. So for video game composers in particular, the second skill that we're going to talk about is an understanding of adaptive music design. Now, video games are different from any other kind of entertainment media because we don't know how and when the drama is going to unfold, right? Because the player is director and producer. And so the player gets to decide, I'm going to go fight this guy. No, never mind, I'm going to run away. Or I'm going to go left, I'm going to go right. So as a composer, you don't know when any of those things are going to happen in advance. So we've had to invent new methodologies to underscore action that's unfolding unpredictably in real time. So one way I like to think about this is to think about music score not as a timeline, but as Tinker Toys. So we've got a piece of music here. Each Tinker Toy represents a particular music that has a particular function. And we can go from this block of music through a transition to another block of music. And look at all these different possibilities. We might go from that track over here in this direction and connect with this piece of music. Or we might decide to go over here and connect with this one. Do you kind of see the point I'm making? You need to design all of these possibilities into your music score. And of course, we have a few specific and incredibly useful tools for doing that. I'd like to introduce you now, as I do in my book. If you don't like Tinker Toys, you can think of it like Legos or like Kinects. But we're going to talk about these different types of music blocks that enable a video game composer to underscore specific gameplay states and then to transition instantaneously at any time into one of these other states. Let's see what it looks like. So the first block that we're going to talk about is the intro block. The next one that we'll talk about is the loop block. We have a transition block. We have stinger blocks. We use cinematic blocks, and we use tag blocks. Each of these blocks are little pieces of music that have specific functions in the game and can hand off from one to the other as needed to make a seamless score that sounds like it was composed just for your gameplay in real time. When I did the score for Dota 2, I used this approach. I built the score out of these different blocks. And so I'm going to explain them to you tonight in terms of and using examples from the Dota 2 score. Let's first take a look at the intro block. The intro music has the job, there we go, the intro music has the job of setting the mood for all the gameplay that's about to happen. Musically, we set the palette for the score as well. With Dota 2, we had a score that was built on electronic instruments and overlaid with orchestra. A lot of video games use this hybrid approach today. So I thought it might be useful to take a look and a listen to a segment of score for Dota 2 that we use for the introduction. Now, I'm going to show you the sheet music for the orchestra. I want you to notice how open it is, how sparse it is, because most of the score was taken up with electronic instruments, and so we had to leave room for them to speak in the orchestral score. Let's take a look and a listen. All electronic instruments so far. Now there's the orchestra has entered, just the violas. We're coming up measure 16. It's always interesting to me when you have an electronic score and then you bring in orchestra, the orchestral instruments always speak with such dynamic and power and strength. Even in our glorious 8-bit mono kind of super phased playback that we're getting during this webinar. So one of the things about intro blocks too is they need to be able to fade out at any time to hand off to the next music block, which we're going to talk about now is often a loop. Now, a music loop, these are the workhorses of the video game industry. A loop is a piece of music whose end dovetails back into its beginning, creating a seamless and potentially never-ending track of music. Loops are also the bane of the game industry when they've been used poorly. A good loop underscores a single emotional node, never rising too high, never falling too low, always giving us a sense of forward motion that always keeps progressing but never really arrives. Now that kind of approach makes for a good music loop. In Dota 2, we used a standard music loop for boss battles. Let's take a look and a listen. See how the music kind of keeps you in that same state. Even though we change the orchestration so it stays fresh as it goes, we keep you in that single emotional node. And then that will just repeat until you either die or you defeat the enemy. Now I thought it might be interesting for us to take a look at that particular piece, Battle 1, inside of Noteflight. So you can see how the Noteflight software works and even hear the built-in instruments that they've developed so that as you're developing a score, you can kind of get an idea of what it's going to sound like as you go. So this is the track that we've just heard, and now we're hearing the Noteflight version of it. And you even got choir. Nice. And then, of course, it's a loop, so it's an abrupt ending because it dovetails back into the beginning. Hey, John, Harry, that's pretty cool. I enjoyed watching how that worked. The bass trombone, maybe not my favorite sound, but some of those other sounds are really good. That's a great job. So that's a little bit of a look at the Battle 1 loop from Dota 2. Now I want to talk to you about a specialized kind of loop. You see, this one looks like several loops stacked on top of each other. Well, that's exactly what it is. This is a layered loop where we have 3 pieces of music, or in this case, a single piece of music with various parts of the arrangement stacked on top of each other that we can access as the game gets more or less intense. So this is the function of music that we use as the player goes through and explores the lanes in the game and might come across a couple of creeps to fight or might get into a little bit more of an intense battle, not yet a boss battle, but we wanted to be able to scale 3 different degrees of intensity in this part of the game. So the first level of intensity is simply when you're exploring. Then we have, when we get to the second intensity level in the game, we add a second track. And then when we get to the third level of intensity, we add the third track. Let me play these for you so you can get a sense for what we did. For this level, we're just lumbering along with a little percussion and a little bouncing bass line. Now, when you start to fight, we add the second level on top of the first. So you'll hear the percussion, you'll hear the bass line, but you're also going to hear some guitars and some heavier percussion. All in glorious 8-bit mono. All right, so and then let's hear the third layer when it gets added in as well. All right, so that's a little bit about the 3-layer loop. Now, as you heard, the first 2 layers are mostly electronic instruments, and then we overlay the 3rd layer with the orchestra. I thought, again, it might be interesting to look in Noteflight and see just how open the score has to be to make room for all the electronic instruments that happened previously. Let's take a look at the Noteflight for that particular layer. Bass and some horns. Now your cellos come in. We hand off to the higher strings. Let's see how open and sparse it is. And now everybody comes in for a big statement. All right. Thank you. By the way, that's John who's operating the Noteflight software for us. Awesome job. So when we get to the end of these, this string of music blocks, we use a tag. And the tag it brings a sense of finality to all the score that's just preceded it. Now I thought it might be interesting for you to watch and hear how these different pieces of score hand off from one to another in some hypothetical gameplay. So I've created a slide that sort of unfolds over time in a similar way as the gameplay does, allowing you to see which block is playing, when it comes in, and what part of gameplay is associated with that. So we're going to take you through an introduction as we're setting up for the game, and then the layered loop when we're going through the lane, a transition here into a combat loop, and finally a tag at the end. Let's give it a listen, see what you think. Coming up on our transition. And now we're into our loop. And a tag which brings it home. So I think that these little scoring blocks are really wonderful and useful tools that allow us to underscore unpredictable changes in game states and hand off smoothly from one to the other. So thinking about music score like Tinker Toys is really effective. But what if instead of having a different arrangement of the same piece of music, what if you wanted to use 3 different pieces of music? One to underscore your exploration, one to underscore your questing, and another for combat, so that you could just seamlessly transition from one back and forth to the other one as needed. So if we were to use these 3 pieces of music, you'd see that transitioning from this exploration track to this questing track is a little problematic because of the difference in meter, the difference in key, and going from here to here, we've also got a little bit of a train wreck if we were to try to make that transition. So what we've done is we figure out, and I explained this in the, let's see, that's chapter, I can't see what chapter it is, but it's the chapter on advanced techniques. How do you do this? Well, you create a map, a composition map, and write all 3 pieces of music to this same map. Let's take a look. So we want to write a piece of music for exploration, for questing, for combat. So we're going to create a composition map. And for our exploration layer, we're going to start in A minor, we're going to go to F6, A minor over E, C minor over E flat, and would you look at that? Those same harmonic pillars go all the way up into the other 2 layers, right? Our tempos are going to be perfect multiples of one another, so that these bar lines stay perfectly synchronized even as we expand and go throughout the rest of the song. So I thought it might be interesting for us to listen to a little bit of the piece of music that was written for exploration, and then a little bit of the second piece of music that was written for questing, and a little bit of the third piece of music written for combat. All of these written from the same part in their respective maps. Here's a little bit of the exploration music. And here's a little bit of the questing music written from the same part of the map. Interesting, you can hear some similarities, but that is definitely not the same piece of music as the first one. And now a little bit of the combat music written from the same part of the map. So our goal with this is seamless anytime music transitioning between these 3 different pieces of music based on changing game states. We want to be able to go from the exploration music to the questing to the combat and then right back down at any time and have it sound totally seamless. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to play a little 10-second test for you. 10 seconds in each layer so you can hear the transitions as we go up and as we go down. And as we listen to this, ask yourself, does this really sound like different pieces of music cross-faded? Or does it sound like one through-composed piece of music written to underscore whatever gameplay was happening? Let's check it out. Pretty cool technology, isn't it? And the thing is, it's not really a technology. It's more of a technique, because As a composer, you do all the heavy lifting by writing to the maps. You turn this into the programming team, and all they have to do is one single call. Game state change equals crossfade. Done. So dev teams love you when you can deliver something like this. So to be successful, your second skill is you really do need to understand adaptive music design. Now let's talk about the third skill, studio production chops. All right, everybody needs to know how to make the best out of their studio skills. We're going to start off with some MIDI basics. The first thing I want to talk about is writing volume curves. Real great music, it rises and falls, it breathes, right? So you need to write some of that rising and falling into the volume curves underneath your lines so that doesn't have that static MIDI artificial quality to it. Let's take a look also at not just volume curves, but note values. Music ebbs and flows, and it rises and falls. And so we need to bring out emphasis in our lines. We need to find out where are we going to accent, where are we going to pull back, because any great line has that dynamic to it that makes it feel alive and match our biology. Another thing to take a look at is music breathes. And so we need to avoid the habit of quantizing everything to its maximum value and find places in the phrase for a little break. The music can breathe naturally. These are just a few simple tips that help keep your lines from sounding like artificial MIDI approximations of music and more like real music. So the other thing is every musical instrument has tremendous range in its articulations, its way to perform. So rather than try to use a single trombone patch for all of your score, take advantage of the multiple samples available in your sample library and utilize each one for its strength in delivering the sound that you're trying to accomplish. Sometimes you could even stack them together to give a more realistic or punchy performance. Now, when we get the opportunity to have a little bit of budget, if you were to stack a small live string section on top of sampled strings, it really helps bring that to life. Or if you just can bring in a couple of trumpets to put on top of your brass samples, it adds sizzle and definition to your score. If you can only bring in one person on percussion for an orchestral score, I say bring in the timpani player. It really adds quite a bit of drama and punch to what you're doing. And if all you can afford is a couple of players and everything else is sampled, a couple of woodwind players added to your score can really breathe some life into it. So the other thing I want to talk about is actually working with musicians in the studio. You need to be comfortable working with all kinds of different singers and engineers and musicians. You never know when you might be called on to change a brass part or help a singer figure out an approach to a line. And I also wanted to talk about this. So my question for you composers is, if you're recording an orchestra, are you going to sit in the booth or are you going to be out there conducting? So I used to conduct a lot, and every time I'd get back to my studio, I'd think, oh man, I got the perfect tracks, and I'd start listening. It's like, oh wait, what? No, when did that happen? Oh no, how did I miss those notes? Because when you're conducting, you're paying attention to so many different things that it's impossible to give the level of scrutiny and detail that you need for a brilliantly recorded and produced score. So from now on, I sit in the booth, I listen critically, and maybe I'll take one song that I go out there to conduct just to keep me going and also to get some great publicity pictures because they look really good. which brings us to our next skill. And skill number 4 is you need to have some business savvy. In order to keep writing music, you need to keep money coming in the door. This is such an important part of this that I dedicate 4 entire chapters in my textbook to business. And I'd like to touch on just a few of those. So one of the things that you have to put together is what they used to call in the old days a storefront. This is how you project yourself to the world. And it includes everything from your website to your text that you send and social media. Let's take a look at a website that I think is an excellent storefront. This is Gordy Hobbs' website. Notice it's got his name there in big. It says right underneath he's a composer. And you look at this website and it only takes you about 1 second to realize Gordy's in the big leagues. I mean, look at the size of the orchestra. Look at some of those titles. And you can also listen instantly to any music that he's done. I think this is a great website storefront. Another part of your storefront is what you post on Facebook or Twitter, your LinkedIn profile, your YouTube channel. Even what you wear and how you dress says something to the world about you and about who you are and about what kind of a composer you're going to be. All right, so once we've got our storefront, the next thing we need to figure out is how are we going to actually go out and find work? And I've found if we look for games that we want to do, if we try to connect with developers that we'd like to work with, and if we make friends with other talented and hardworking people in the business, these can all be great sources to lead us to prospects. One of the great ways to find games is to go to ign.com/games/upcoming. You can search by platform. I want to see all of the Android games that are coming up in the next 2 years. Type that in, boom, there's your list. Another great way to find upcoming games is to go to conferences like the Game Developers Conference or PAX. And this website, gamecomps.com, gives you an entire list of all the main conferences happening throughout the world. Walking around on the expo floor, you can take a look and see what games are interesting to you and go up and meet the developers. Which brings us to the next one. How do you find developers? Apart from going to conferences, you can go to this website, GameIndustryMaps.com, put in the name of a city, and boom, all of the video game developers in that city will come up. You click on them and you can get all of their contact information, their website, their phone number. It's a great way to find the developers that you might want to work with. So the other thing we talked about is finding peers, and I'd like to put in a plug now for the Game Audio Network Guild. This is our professional guild as video game composers. I have made lifelong friends by getting active and being involved in this guild, and I don't mind telling you that many great game scores have come to me over the years because I've been referred by my friends in the guild. So a big plug for that. The next thing that a lot of people want to know is how much they should charge. Huge topic. I go into a tremendous amount of detail in my book about how much you should charge for various stages of your career, but just to touch on it briefly, we'll say that these are the different levels at which most game composers are charging. From the low rate of $250 a minute when you're first starting out and maybe working with some friends who are building a game in their garage, all the way up to $2,500 a minute for the latest AAA game score, or something that involves a sophisticated and complex music design. For more information, I refer you back to that chapter in my book on rates. The next thing you know is that some scores involve mixed rates. You might charge $500 a minute for this kind of asset, $1,500 for this, and more for another one. And all of those things are outlined in contracts. And contrary to popular belief, negotiating a contract is not necessarily your own personal Tiananmen Square. There's a lot of things that we can learn and do to make the contract negotiation process comfortable and friendly. And again, all these things are outlined in great detail in composing music for games. A few things you got to know about. Are you going to sell them the copyright, or are you just going to license them the music? Are you going to do a creative fee deal or a package deal? You need to outline what the milestones are, because this is where you actually get paid. How much you get paid, when in the contract you get paid. How are you going to handle revisions, and how do you get approved on the music? Is it implicit? Is it explicit? Because by getting approved, that's usually how you get paid. What do we need to understand about indemnification, right? Most contracts that developers will send you have a totally ridiculous indemnification that is unfair, and you need to understand how to get out of that. And what's a fair indemnification for a composer? How do you handle a cancellation of a contract? And if it seems, ladies and gentlemen, like I'm rushing through this, it's because I'm almost out of time. So I'm getting the high side that I need to wrap up. Ancillary streams are something that need to be addressed in contracts. Money that comes from soundtrack sales, or licensing music for a movie trailer, or getting paid from a performing rights organization. And finally, is there any additional compensation like royalties, sales bonuses, things of that nature? So all of these things we need to understand as video game score composers so that we can be successful in business. The final skill that I want to talk about for just a moment is mental fitness. The most powerful and critical piece of technology that you will ever use in your entire career sits right between your ears. It's this that's the workshop of imagination. This is where all brilliant ideas are generated. So it behooves us as composers to do those things to keep our brains strong, vibrant, and creative for decades. Let's take a look at a few things we can do. I call water the magic elixir for composers because it keeps us hydrated, it keeps our energy going, and it keeps the brain lubricated and percolating along. I always keep a big mug of water at my desk. I sip at it all day long. It's wonderful. I highly recommend it. We also need to get up and get out of our chairs. Sitting for long periods of time is not healthy for your body, and it's not healthy for your brain. Even if you just get up for 5 minutes every hour and walk around, that helps. Also, what we eat, the things that we take into our body matter a lot. Here are a handful of foods that scientists have found are particularly useful for strengthening the synapses and the neurons and the transfer ability in the brain. Avocado, interestingly, was at the top of every list. And then you've got things like kale and blueberries and walnuts and salmon and eggs. And no, I'm sorry, pizza didn't make the list. So the other thing we have to do to take care of our brain is to get enough sleep. I know sometimes you got to do all-nighters, every once in a while you get crazy deadlines, but for the most part, we have to make sure that we're giving our brain 7, 8 hours of sleep on a regular basis, because when you're sleep deprived, the first thing that goes is innovative thinking, creative problem solving, right? Exactly the type of creative functions that we need to be effective as composers. And finally, it probably doesn't need to be said, but illegal drugs, if they're doing this kind of damage in a few years to her exterior, imagine the kind of damage that's happening on the inside. Things like cocaine, ecstasy, heroin, even alcohol, tobacco, all of these things are abused, and they're devastating for the creativity of a composer over time. We don't want you to have a 5-year career. We want you to have a 30-year career and keep this brain healthy and percolating along for a long time. So the last slide, I think, on health has to do with getting out in nature, connecting with things that are bigger than us, having a spiritual life. All these things help us to be healthier, more vibrant human beings. And in that state, there's no question that we can create much better music. So that's the fifth skill, mental fitness. Quick review. Number 4 was business savvy. Number 3 was studio production chops. Number 2 was understanding adaptive music design. And the first one was understanding the very language of music scoring. I'm really glad that you joined me today. It's been fun to talk with you. I hope that something positive and inspiring has come from our time together. Again, thank you to Noteflight for making this possible, and I hope to see you at the Gang Awards in the days to come. Thank you so much.
Wow, Chance, I cannot thank you enough for that. That was truly compelling, inspiring. We've done a lot of these, and you know, it's rare that we get goosebumps listening. So, thanks so much. That was great, man.
Thanks, Harry.
You're welcome. So, folks, again, you want to learn more about Chance? Go to chancethomas.com and learn more about his career and his ideas. A couple of things. Not only did Chance help us with this masterclass, but we enlisted his help so that we could announce tonight, right now, a video game scoring contest. And we've got some great partners with this. We've got Missing Link Games and Squishy Games. They are the publisher and the developer of a new game that's coming out this summer called Rogue Invader. We've got the $99 Orchestra, who will professionally record the winner's score, which will be included in a 2 to 3 minute combat scene in a secret level of the game. Submissions are due Thursday, June 30th at 11:59 p.m. Eastern Time. We'll announce the winner a couple of weeks later. And again, the winning score will actually be included in the game. The author will have full credit. So there's lots of information to learn about and read. You can go to notes.noteflight.com right after this webinar. That page will be pinned to the front page of the blog, or go to notes.noteflight.com/video-game-scoring-contest. Read everything on that page. Visit all the links. There's also an entry form there. Read everything you can, listen to the music that's already been composed for the game so that you're matching to it. And not only will all of those wonderful things happen, when you get your Pro Tools file back from $99 Orchestra, Chance Thomas will help make sure that all the tempo maps and everything are all set up correctly so that there will be seamless integration into the game. So, with all of that said, it's been an incredible night. We really are running late. We won't take questions now, but we will capture those questions and see if we can get some answers. Thank you so much for joining us. This was a great night, and we look forward to seeing you again with a future masterclass. And good luck if you enter the contest. Thanks again, folks.